Will Eisner has been one of the greatest comic book authors of all times. He was a complete author. He both wrote a story and drew it. His comics talked about the real world, real people with real problems, like repaying loans, bankruptcy, neighbor relations, and everyday human interactions. Together with Hugo Pratt, the first author we looked at, he invented the graphic novel. Eisner actually coined the term. This video will look at his red thread. A narrative thread connects all his works and runs through the themes he explores. Egoism is what drives his characters. The entire world in his stories is moved by egoism, by the idea of personal advantage. Every single character wants something and does everything to obtain it. It may be to better themselves economically or to conquer someone else's heart, or as simple as a bottle of hooch. Selfishness is what drives every action. It's a world made out of ordinary people, and, like in life, they look out for themselves and what they could gain out of a situation. Even those who try to help the community do it as it is advantageous for themselves, first and foremost. Eisner does not judge them. He wants to show the humans that form a society with varying degrees of morality, and everyone is ultimately interested in their own well-being. The most famous example is A Contract with God, where Ephraim Hirsch, a profoundly religious Jewish man, carves a contract with God on a stone tablet to live a life of good deeds. He will be rewarded with success in life, which he does, until the death of his adopted daughter. Hirsch lives it as a breach of the contract and abandons his faith. He illicitly uses a synagogue's bonds entrusted to him to buy the tenement building he had lived in, becoming a mean businessman in a penthouse. This example shows how a man behaves for his own well-being. As soon as he believes that the situation is no longer convenient for him, he turns away from his religion and searches for other ways to be well. Eisner came from a Jewish background. His stories talk a lot about the Jewish community. What he concentrates on is not the Jewish culture or religion, but the perception that people have of people of Jewish heritage. He often shows how the perception of the Jewish community by others is overfilled with stereotypes, usually negative. In some stories it is a vital part, in others it is a side only touched on by a couple of thought balloons, but is always present. Although most of his stories are set in the USA, especially New York, the story that best represents the negative perception of Jewish people by the community is Fagin the Jew, a retelling of the life of Solomon Fagin, the character from Oliver Twist. This reimagining of Fagin life became Eisner's manifesto against the stereotypical view of Jewish people. In the story, Fagin is mistreated and even condemned to prison only because he is a man of Jewish faith. Since people treat him like a thief and a scoundrel, he starts behaving like one, stealing and cheating people, regrouping orphan children to pickpocket people for him, and becoming the character we know from Oliver Twist. Eisner's life experiences inspired him. He represented mainly the class of people that he met. He came from a family of immigrants and lived in New York's suburbs. Most of his stories take place in New York City, in the street called Dropsy Avenue. Most of the people he represents in his stories are low class, migrants of the first and second generation, minorities and oppressed. Their stories vary a lot. The starting point is always one of poverty and difficulties. Eisner likes to make his stories plausible and represent reality, meaning that some of his protagonists work hard and better their position in life, and gain enough social leverage to change other people's luck, for better or worse. Others are pushed down by society and get overwhelmed. What makes it plausible is the mixture of choice and circumstances, like in real life, where you choose your path, but some parts are out of your hands. The best example is A Life Force, a choral story set in New York between the very late 1920s and the early 1930s. Passing through the crash of 1929, all characters are affected, some losing what they have and others seeing opportunity to change their lives, like Jacob and Angelo, two carpenters, both immigrants, one Jewish and the other Italian. They struggle to make a living until they decide to work together. As the price of everything goes down, they can buy a failing lumber mill and create a decent business. Something that must be mentioned about his work is how he totally revolutionized the media through the use of frames. He experimented with the media, changing the page's structure, using it like a tool to tell the story itself, taking away more often than not the line that defines a frame, giving it a sense of reality. He played a lot with zooms and splash pages to represent life, moving away from the classical strip form that was fashionable when he started. Looking at modern comic books, it seems obvious, but without his experimentation, the media would be completely different. In my opinion, Will Eisner is crucial for the history of comic books. He is one of the fathers of what we consider the graphic novel, and the idea that you can tell serious stories that talk about life through the media. It's not by chance that the most prestigious awards in the sector are the Will Eisner Comic Industry Awards, which cover every aspect of the media. In the video description you'll find a link to a couple of his stories, so you can check it out yourself. Onward to the next author!